You could see there's
You can see there's some.
Okay. We are right at 6:30. I'm hoping. Everything's on, so everything's on. We've got a couple of these floating around.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, 6:31. Shall we get underway? I don't have a gavel. Sorry. There we go. So, hey, we're trying to experiment tonight. I've got one of the lavalier mics because I know that at the community council meeting we had a problem with hearing. So, if you're doing a mic night, you know, when I was in a band in high school, we had to eat the mic. But if you get it close to you, people should be able to hear the recording. If you are more comfortable with that microphone up there, I'll turn it on in a second. But we're going to get underway. I'm going to welcome everybody to our June. I'm getting up ahead of myself. Our June 2023 meeting of the El Dorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee. Tonight, let me stop the share on this. It's hard to drive and talk at the same time. So I'm John Davey. I'm the chair. Other officers here in the room with us, Vice Chair Tim White, Secretary Bob Williams. I don't see who might be in. I don't know if John Raslier is in tonight, but he's feeling better. He's on the mend, so I'm hoping that we'll hear from John tonight, or at least he'll hear our recording. And then I know that Brooke is. I'm looking. I don't see Brooke in the list, but our other vice chair, Brooke Washburn, she's switching jobs, so she's in between. Lawyers are busy. I don't know if you know that. So, but hopefully we'll have Brooke jump in later tonight. So, as we get the meeting underway, the first thing we do is we call the meeting to order. If there's any changes to the meeting agenda from officers, we might change the sequence of a couple things here because supervisors, I think John's here, George is in the room, but George, I believe, has some stuff he's got tonight. Planning Commissioner Chris Payne, District 2 is here tonight, so we want to allow them to, any discussion we want that they want to participate in. They have things to go to tonight. There's a big meeting in Cameron Park about a fire station. So, and Brooke just jumped in, so we're in good shape. So we might rearrange the order of the items, so we're just going to get underway right away. So the first thing we do is we offer an opportunity for members of the public to offer some public comment on anything that is not on our agenda tonight. So if there's anybody in the room that has anything they want to offer that's not on our agenda, either grab a microphone in front of you, make sure it turns green. Mine is green. And, or if you can use that microphone, just push the button, make sure that's green. So nobody in the room. I got one for public comment tonight, if nobody else has, but I'm gonna, I got one hand up, so let me go to that. Joel, let's see, you should be able to go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Oh, good. I don't know if that's good or not. I'd just like to say I went to the county fair last Friday. It was very enjoyable. I had to dump my water bottle because they don't allow you to bring water in there. But I did not find any place to refill it. And I really think we should be providing water for people when we have that big of a crowd. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. It's good to see you. So that's something that the Fair Board, maybe as residents of El Dorado County, we could bring to their attention that we should supply some drinking water refill stations for water bottles. So thank you. Thank you.
There was a lot of booths around there that had water that they were handing out too.
so.
Okay, so they're handing, but no, okay. The refill station might not be a bad idea for future events. Okay. With that, I'm going to offer my own public comment. It's on our agenda tonight. Our District 1 Planning Commissioner, John Meany, is here tonight. And John, hey. Okay, so you've got a little bit of news. And should I share it myself or would you like to discuss? So, well, he didn't get this approved by me, but John is moving away from Dorado Hills. So John will be leaving the Planning Commission. More importantly, he'll be leaving as our neighbor. And I want to take the opportunity to thank you. You've always been engaged with APAC, even before you were a planning commissioner. When you were a county employee, you listened. I've seen you at events. But you always are paying attention to El Dorado Hills. It's your district primarily, but you listen in every district. And your assistance has been invaluable to me as we conduct these things. And, you know, none of us here are experts, but you provide that history of what has happened in the county, why it's happened in the county, processes, and things that we should be looking for. And so that's been invaluable to us as an organization, to me personally. I guess I'm going to have to go to Texas to visit you, is I think is how it's going to happen. But I wanted to say thank you. And for years and years and years, the amount of contributions you've made to us in terms of informing us and keeping us apprised of things that are coming, or you know, when we're being nutty with our comments, which happens once in a while. But I wanted to thank you for that tonight. So thank you, John. Do you have anything to offer? I'll let you go.
Well, I'm going to jump in on that. John and I are very different people. The way we look at things, at life and stuff like that. But we get along. And one of our, you know, I respect his opinions. He respects mine. We agree to disagree, but that doesn't stop people with differing opinions from being friends and being good neighbors, if you will. John, as John Davies said, excellent supporter of APAC going back when I first got involved 8 or 9 years ago. Very knowledgeable. But I think what I'm sorry we're leaving him. I'm sorry he's leaving California. I know he has brighter prospects down in Texas, and I appreciate that. But as a person who has been so actively involved in making El Dorado Hills a better place to live, his contributions are going to be missed. So John, I wish you and your wife the greatest joy and happiness. I want to see pictures of the house once it's built, and I want to see you in the 10-gallon hat and the cowboy boots.
Okay, so I'll offer any of our other officers, or maybe are you jumping up? He's coming up to the front. You might want to push the button on there. Green is live.
I just want to say something, John. You know, you're going to be dearly missed, and we go back a long ways, long time ago. So anyway, and through a lot of it is through the church. So.
I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure serving alongside you guys, and you know, I brag on you guys all the time to the people around me that you guys really do a great job supporting your community. So it's an invaluable help to me as well. A lot of times, John and Tim, we have these long discussions on the phone about stuff that's going on, and I always glean a lot of good information from you guys as well. So again, it's been a pleasure. I'll miss you guys. I may chime in every once in a while, just for fun. So
If your phone number's not changing, I'll just keep texting you.
So yeah, it's been a pleasure and an honor, and again, you guys do an invaluable job, and you guys are kind of a model for the county when it comes to public engagement. So I just wanted to thank you guys. So.
Okay, well, thank you. And I know Supervisor Heidal's here. You're coming up next, but if you have anything you want to chime in with for Commissioner Vania, fire away.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You hear me, John? Okay. All right, good. I just want to make sure it was coming through. So yeah, I want to extend my personal thanks to John Vania for all of his dedicated work. He and I have worked together on a lot of different projects. We haven't always agreed on things, but at the end of the day, we ended up with a better answer, I think, than would have had if we'd just worked things independently. So I very much appreciate his volunteering to be my planning commissioner and all the great work he's done. And I wish he and his family the best as they move to Texas and undertake that new part of their life. So I think it's all going to be good when it's settled out. So
Thank you, John. So that was my contribution for public comment tonight. John, you did not have to drive all the way down here, but we appreciate seeing you. And let me know when you need to pack and I'll avoid you. But thank you for coming tonight. And maybe there's some things you can chime in on tonight as we get through this meeting. So are there any other public comments? I don't see any in Zoom. And I don't see any more. So moving along. The very first opportunity we have to hear from not us tonight is from supervisors. So we have District 1 Supervisor John Heidel is remote tonight and his bandwidth looks low. So I'm gonna let John jump in here before he drops off. But John, do you want to go ahead and share your part of the show tonight?
certainly, yeah. I want to greet everyone from the Upper Mountains area north of Truckee. So area called Gray Eagle, if you're familiar with that. It's a very beautiful area. So we're up here spending time trying to recreate and have some fun. So, but I want to extend my appreciation to everyone who's attending tonight and listening in. But one thing I want to add relative to the county activities is that we've had a major activity going on in health and human services to try to look at ways of providing greater service, being more attuned to the needs of the community. And I think as we roll out that plan, I think a lot of people will be very pleased with the answers we've got. We still have some staffing issues in health and human services, but it's getting better over time, and we're attracting some very, very capable and competent people. But there's a lot of things to come. And so once we get that organized, I'll be very pleased to share that with APAC and other organizations in terms of the new direction that we're taking with health and human services, because it really will, I think, be an enhancement for everyone. I'll leave it at that.
Hey, I'm gonna chime in. Hey, John, do you want to go ahead and talk about that meeting, Karen Gardner's letter? I don't have it in front of me, but you want to speak on it?
I don't have it in front of me either, George.
Okay.
So I will say that Karen Gardner, our planning department and stuff, has been very involved with trying to look at opportunities to improve our planning processes and tie various services into the area. So we really are focusing on all of El Dorado County, but we recognize that there's a significant amount of growth still going on in El Dorado Hills. And therefore, we have to make sure that we focus on the proper research, the proper protocols. The recent experience that we had down in the business park with the proposed project has caused us to make some changes. And I think people will see that very short term relative to basically trying to restrict the amount of uses that might occur in our existing business park, and over time really establish better criteria for the types of businesses we want to attract. So a lot of work going on there. So I'll leave it at that, George. And if you want to add, please do.
Yeah, I just want to say that Karen Gardner has actually restructured the matrix a little bit on some of the stuff, especially when you're talking about warehouses, because it seems like according to her, it needs to go into light industrial or heavy industrial and not in the R&D. So anyway, that's what she's working on. That's going to be brought back, but that went into effect that day when we voted on it. That particular day, it went into effect at that time. So it's a good thing, especially when they're working through the process. And anyway, and I'll give Bob some more information on some of the other stuff that's coming up, especially the other projects. Also, I was out in Grizzly Flat the other day with the Forest Service. We walked there this last Thursday, and they're going to donate property up there for the community center. It was in the paper. I don't know if anybody ever seen it, but it was a great thing. Let me go back a little bit first. First off, I've been working on this project for approximately about a year and a half. And I've been pushing it, persistent. And that's what I'm kind of about, because if I don't get what I want, I keep pushing it, Anyway, what happened was I had a Zoom call with the Secretary of Ag, and there was 12 people on that Zoom call. And he kind of cut out, but his staff was there, and he said, we're going to make this happen no matter what. And we appreciate everything you're doing, and we feel for these people out in Grizzly Flat. A lot of people say that. You don't believe them because you know how the government can be sometimes. But he did come through. It was a great thing. And then we had a meeting with the Forest Service. And then that meeting took place and we talked about it and stuff after that. And then we met out there in Grizzly Flat and we walked the area where they're going to put the new community center. So it's going to be a great thing as they rebuild up there, sort of bring that community back together. They used to have hamburger night, all that kind of different things, but that building could be used for different things. It could be used for a command center. Our ROP programs, especially our schools, could be able to use that facility. There's a lot of good things that's going to happen with this new facility up there. So it's a big plus for the people and that community out there, having this community center. So I got a call from Kevin Kiley, and he said, George, how did you get this done? It never happens. They never give property away. It never happens. So he was really shocked. And he said, what is your secret? And I said, I ain't giving it. I told him that too. So anyway, I think it's just, like I say, it's just persistent and making sure that they do the right thing. You know, these people are very, very busy in Washington, D.C. You know, they claim to be, and I'm sure they are. But that's why you got to keep after it all the time. Make sure it happens. And we made it happen. So it's been a great thing. And I'll tell you, I was smiling from year to year. And it's not going to be 5 acres. Looks like it's going to be 10 acres.
Huh. Awesome. Well then,
Hey, John, can I ask
Yeah.
a quick question of John?
Sure.
With regard to the planning and the county, I was wondering if there's been any discussion about State Farm and Allstate pulling out of underwriting any fire insurance or homeowners policies. Has that affected how we're looking at projects and developments on the residential scale?
Yeah, there has been discussion on it, but there hasn't been a determination what kind of alternatives need to be pursued. My understanding is that the State Farm one, at least, is saying it's a temporary situation, but we all know how that goes, right? Temporary can be long-term when it's all said and done. So more to come on it, but I'm hoping it isn't long-term. But one of the things they've been asking for is rate increases, and they've not been getting rate increases through through the state, basically. So we have to continue to monitor that. I do know that there's still a number of carriers in our area. So if you're looking for alternate insurance, you really just have to shop around and see what you can find. But yeah, those two are major contributors to the insurability of El Dorado County. So hopefully they will, after a short hiatus, come back in and start opening up new policies for people, but more to be seen.
Yeah, and so I'm in the insurance industry, not by choice, but now it's been 25 years, so I guess I'm in the insurance industry. I build websites. But yeah, most carriers in California have not had a rate increase for homeowners, for anything. For auto is a big one right now. You're probably going to see that more. But like Progressive, they've been asking for almost 3 years for a rate increase, and they just got it. As soon as they got it, they filed for another one because it's not enough based off of what their tables show and their loss ratios. The same Mercury got a rate increase. But Progressive, you'll see the commercials on TV, but those are national ad buys. They're not soliciting new customers in California. They're just trying to get up to speed with their premiums to cover their existing customer base. So when we buy, we sell a lot of insurance leads through our websites to all the carriers nationally. Progressive is not buying. They're buying in sort of the Midwest, Kansas, right around there, a little bit in Pennsylvania, but that's about it for new customers. John, you got a green?
Yeah, I'm a State Farm customer, and I actually called them on behalf of the person who's buying my house because the only one that they were going to get State Fair.
The not so fair plan.
Yeah, but State Farm said they're not writing any more policy until at the very least.
Yeah, we had heard the same thing, and that's for auto as well for a lot of carriers. So, yeah, so the fair plan is, it's called insurance of last resort for a reason. If you want to pay $8,000 to $12,000 a year for your fire insurance only, there you go, and then you still have to get homeowners insurance. But do you have a mic? It's close by so we can hear you.
Well, I just want to say one thing. Also, the fair plan, they're talking about anywhere from 30 to 40%.
Yeah.
And I was under the understanding that they wouldn't take on new customers.
We keep the existing. Yeah. Yeah. And so I was a Safeco policyholder from 1995 until last summer about this time, and they let me know that they were going to not renew my policy. No claims. I have a fire hydrant 50 feet from my driveway, and the fire station, Station 86, is less than 2 miles from my house. And they just said, no, you're in a fire zone that it's too much exposure, so we're not doing it. So I ended up with farmers, and typically when you have the captive agents, their rates aren't that much better, if you have a broker that can shop. And as John suggested, you really do have to shop, and you just have to hit up everybody. So fingers crossed, they get some sort of premium relief, although it's not a good thing for the consumer, but having insurance is better than not having it. And a lot of us desperately need it. So it's a good question. Thank you, Brooke. You got one too? Oh, we're gonna be, it's insurance. Man, I do this all day. Go ahead.
My concern is what happened at the Board of Supervisors meeting last week when Karen Gardner, she used her authority, which she does have by ordinance, I understand that, to make determination and put it into immediate effect. It seems rushed. If the county is going to look at.
Can he use a mic?
Oh, yeah.
I've got it right here. If the county is going to look at new definitions for zoning and what maybe, if they agree that warehouses don't belong in R&D and warehouses should be either light or heavy in industry, depending on the nature of the warehouse, it seems to me the county could wait before something's put into immediate effect and wait 30 or 60 days before they make any changes so that the public could have a chance to comment on it. It just seems to me that it's a rushed decision made probably because of what happened with respect to Project Frontier. And I'm not sure that making that type of rushed decision benefits the residents of the county. It seems to go against the transparency rules that county government is always advocating, saying they want to be transparent. And when you bury this in an agenda item, and if you look at the business plan where there were 13 things that she was going to discuss in her department, number 8 or 9, which was major changes to zoning, and there was no explanation. Everything else had an explanation. So to me, that's not being transparent, and it goes against what we're trying to achieve with respect to the county. That's all.
So since we're here on that, Chris, you have a microphone to you? This is on our agenda tonight just to discuss, to let you know what was talked about. So we'll run through it.
We know George has to
Yeah,
leave,
George, so we'll see what else we need to get done.
I don't see I don't see a red or a green.
You push the button, it turns green?
This one more.
There you go. Awesome.
I found out some things since the meeting last Tuesday. What Tim was talking about is that there was the long-range planning document that brought staff in, 5, 6 people. They wanted to be there to explain what was going on. One of the things that she didn't say, which I found out the next day and have it here, is that there is now a planning and building department quarterly report. First one was January through March 2023. And so I got this because I'm a planning commissioner. I assume John Benya also received it. What's important, Tim, is that this does describe in more detail each of those work plan items, which we didn't get at the Board of Supervisors. I guess at the time, one of the things that John and I have as planning commissioners, we get a one-on-one with staff once a month. And so mine was last Thursday, and I asked, hey, why wasn't this discussed at the board meeting? And it was that she had a plan of what she was going to talk about, and she knew that this was pending the next day, so she didn't get into it. I think that was a mistake. She should have got into it. It would have shown that they were on top of their game. Tim, to your point then, I think there is some changes going on. We got to then figure out whether they're the things that you, me, John, the type that we want to have for our communities. That's my comments. I just wanted to let you know.
I have the materials right here. We can throw on the screen and we can continue to talk about it. But just so people understand, and I know that at the community council meeting, there was a brief discussion of this. So Director Gardner sent a letter to the Board of Supervisors and some county staff. It's a director's determination regarding fulfillment center, heavy distribution, and parcel hub uses. And so it's a 4-page letter. It's on the screen here. It'll be in our materials tonight. You'll be able to see it. But as we jump through it, I'm gonna have to minimize this so I can see what I'm looking at. So there is something in the county ordinances that allow the director to make a determination. But they need to come back and support it and apply it as an update to the zoning ordinances. But they have that ability to make that determination from the director's position. And of course, I went through it and I did not find it, but I've been told it's there. So, and this is probably in reaction to what we all went through from the beginning of the year until beginning of the end of May, beginning of June. So there's no listed uses in the matrix or defined elsewhere in the zoning code for fulfillment centers, heavy distribution, or parcel hub uses. Although industrial R&D zones use a specific matrix for usage, it includes wholesale storage and distribution that we thought was not appropriate for what the project was. That use type does not contemplate the unique needs of fulfillment centers, which are essentially a new sort of activity that's not considered in our zoning ordinance. Heavy distribution or parcel hub uses that are described in the discussion below. So here, the county zoning code authorizes the planning and building director to determine if a use not already listed in the zoning code is allowable, and if so, what the use type is for determining proper zoning. So if it's something that's new and we don't have it defined yet in the zoning, the director has the ability to make a determination. So the director has determined that fulfillment centers, heavy distribution, and parcel hub uses shall be classified as the industrial specialized use type, which is a new sort of definition. To make the determination, you have to make these certain findings, and there's 4 main determinations you need to make, and then you could apply it and have it voted in by the board into the zoning ordinance. It'll go to the planning commission, it'll go to the board of supervisors. At the end of it, essentially, fulfillment center, heavy distribution. Oops. I cannot tell who's talking. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So fulfillment center, heavy distribution, parcel hub uses are compatible with other uses in the industrial light and the industrial heavy zones. The use requires a conditional use permit and therefore can be conditioned to include measures that address their potential compatibility issues. So with that, essentially that goes through a big thing. So industrialized, specialized, she's made a determination, defines it here in her letter to the board. But she says that the use classification provides for those uses that do not clearly fit within another industrial use classification. And that was consistent with what I think we said as an organization here, but more importantly, what the community was saying. So she's made that determination, and I think that was her intent was to get out in front of it so that any future projects, we're not going to have this debate.
Recording in progress.
This debate. Oops. Well, I guess we're hearing ourselves in. It's not me. Oh, I guess we're hearing ourselves. Hey, John, do you have your speaker on pretty loud? I'm going to go ahead and mute that just so that we don't, I think, because it was showing his connectivity is pretty bad. So essentially what it comes down to, the letter, so the use type is not allowed with an approval of a conditional use permit. It is allowed, but it's not allowed in the R&D zone going forward. That was her determination. It was effective the day that she made that presentation to the board, or that discussion at the board. So there's some more discussion about conditional use permits. Oops, I went too far. But essentially, my concern was how are we as a community the county overall? How are we going to have that discussion? How are we going to get in front of decision makers? What's the process for moving through the planning department, to the planning commission, to the board of supervisors? Because we have concerns like this is a new use, and we need to probably noodle this out because somebody else is going to want to do it too. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the share on that. Bob, did you have something on this?
Yeah, I have a couple things, and I think a couple of our people out in the audience also would like to speak to it. But just as a preface, I think that what Gardner produced at the board meeting is a light years improvement over what we've had in the past. It's not perfect by any means, but it is light years ahead of, and it really does remove some of the issues that got us to where we almost got to in terms of ending up in court. And thank God we didn't have to do on that one. However, there's a couple of that we're going to be speaking of today that may lead us in that same direction unless this is resolved. I think that there's a couple of points. So to Tim's point, I believe something as critical, as important as this, there needs to be full and open and candid public input, some kind of mechanism, whether or not it be here or some kind of forum that she wants to create there in Placerville that we could all come up and attend. But it's critical that we go through that document and actually look at it. The words fulfillment center is one thing she's keyed in, but are we just talking about a fulfillment center because that's a jargon phrase that somehow is being used around e-commerce facilities these days, or are we looking at something that's going to be more meaningful over time? I also have an issue with regard to discretionary power. And quite frankly, what we're talking about here is re-establishing the same kind of discretionary power that was being promoted and advocated by the applicant of Project Frontier, saying, no, we have the absolute right, we're going to move forward, and that the zoning administrator will make a determination. No, that is not the way things should happen in a civilized environment. It must be done appropriately through a zoning process that has been developed over time. Our general plan is actually a pretty damn good document. There's flaws in it, and we can certainly augment it. The specific plans we're having to deal with, particularly when we're talking about the business park, there are certainly issues that we need to deal with. But in terms of providing any staff member, just not the planning commissioner, but any staff member, a carte blanche discretionary power as wide as this thing is currently written, would have us believe would be that is in effect currently is troubling to me. And I would hope that we'll have some time to input and resolve these matters before it goes back before all the supervisors in the future. I have one more point, and obviously I know George wants to say something, and you obviously want to make a couple of comments. The other thing is getting back to Tim's point. We have two issues here that were two applications that were done in advance of this particular reinterpretation of what is research and what is development. And the question is, can any pronouncement made by the planning director retroactively be applied? And I don't have that answer, but I think probably county council needs to give us an opinion on that as quickly as possible, so we'll know. Otherwise, we're going to waste our breath going through some of these other things.
There's some question about, the Frontier applicant never called it a fulfillment center.
Idiot.
Well, they did one time, then they said it wasn't. It wasn't
Well, I
a fulfillment
understand
center. So there are a lot of ways to approach it. So obviously, as part of the zoning, the zoning code update, they would have to provide those definitions and say, this is X equals.
Right.
So who was first? You have something, you know what, I got another one, I'll run one out.
So does this allow the applicant to turn around and reapply and get a favorable zoning?
Well, they can ask to rezone, but they seem to say they're done. For that applicant.
that applicant.
For that applicant. But, yeah, so the determination is that within that existing zoning, they're not going to allow that sort of usage based on her determination. And they'll update the zoning code, the ordinance, with that new finding and provide those definitions and that new specialized description. But that takes time. That's months. I mean, that goes to the planning commission a couple times before I think it even goes to the board of supervisors when it's a major zoning. And that's not scheduled for, I'm looking at John, like, they're gonna call you back. But yeah, yeah, I know that it comes, minor and majors go to the planning commission before it moves forward, so.
I think it's important to realize, and I think you're talking around it without actually talking about it. The property still exists.
Yes.
Still owned.
Mhm.
Still being determined as what its future holds.
Yes.
And it's that part that I believe APAC and
Yes.
others, community itself, need to be constantly diligent about keeping that in mind. So there was never a discussion about fulfillment center because we found out through definition, fulfillment centers were about 1.5 to maybe 2 million. And this thing was like 4.5.
Yeah.
So it didn't have a definition as what we may have wanted at the time. Nor do we really know, because it was never really talked about, never got to that point. They pulled the application, therefore we never got to the other parts of it. So I think it's important, and I think you understand also here at APAC, we need to be very careful, not only with this property, but others that may fulfill the future of El Dorado Hills. Thank you.
Who is that? Who are there?
I think George has.
Oh, there you are.
Okay, my biggest concern here is the definition of heavy distribution versus the existing wholesale storage and distribution. We saw with Project Frontier that became more of a wholesale type operation or was likely to, which reduced some of the positive impacts of sales tax revenue to the county. Much of the benefit was going away and we were bearing the cost. And that concerns me with the other project that's submitted that we're going to talk about later, which also is identified as wholesale distribution. So these types of vehicles, these types of projects present the heavy impact to our roads, our systems, and our population without contributing major tax revenues to counter that. Yes, we get the TIF fees, but the TIF fees pale in comparison to the costs that these types of facilities bring to the community. So again, my biggest concern is defining the difference between heavy distribution that would fit in the industrial zones versus the wholesale storage and distribution that exists and would remain within the R&D.
Thank you. Thanks, George. Is there anybody else in the room? Okay, I'll go. Is there anybody on Zoom? If you want to raise your hand, if you have a question or a comment about this item, we moved it ahead a little bit. We just wanted to accommodate the fact that supervisors are here now and that they have to, they have other events to attend. I don't see other hands coming up. George, is there anything else here that we don't want to keep you all night? Is there something on our agenda or something that you wanted to address?
I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
I'll keep you guys informed of what's going on and be updated.
Awesome.
This process goes through, boards and stuff like that when it's brought back. And then what Karen Gardner's, because I've already reached out to that right now about this other project, so.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Yeah.
I'll let you guys.
And yeah, we'll invite Karen to come back. Karen's been here and made presentations before.
It'd
So
be a good
yeah.
idea to even have her here, invite her here.
yeah. So
Well, I would hope that it happened before it goes before the supervisors and
oh
becomes.
yeah.
Okay, well,
So we will.
if it's going to be within the next month,
um,
apparently,
is it?
before the supervisors. Yeah.
Let's find out.
Okay,
So
that'd be good.
we'll send a letter from APAC to Karen's office and see
Okay.
if she has anything that she could share.
Good.
But,
Good.
we have a meeting in July.
Hey, John, can I maybe just make one small question to the
Sure.
group? On that point, I thought when we were doing the analysis on the Frontier project, the heavy industrial, one of the components of it was the trucking and how we as a county define what the heavy use of trucks and what impact that would have. And that's why it would be zoned heavy industrial. And I'm not quite sure why we would need another category or another subsect, because it would seem that a fulfillment center, you could just tweak the use of the heavy industrial and keep the same zone, but just have it specified that a fulfillment center is heavy industrial.
Let's submit that to Karen's office and see if we can get an answer. It's a good question. I mean, I think we had identified that we thought that usage was more compatible with that zoning, and that it wasn't compatible with R&D just in the descriptions of the project. So let's submit that question. We'll send a letter in and see if Karen's willing to come and talk, or just maybe even provide just a letter to us so we can understand it. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, George, and
All right.
thank you, Chris.
Bob, you want this? Because this is all the stuff that's on that.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Sure. Thank you.
So we're going to move backwards in our agenda. Here, how about some happy talk now?
Yeah.
The appointment of new APAC voting members. Now, these members all worked on some subcommittees that we had started to define, but we got sort of off track with Frontier. So I'm trying to remember how we even do this. I know that we can vote as officers to do it. I don't know if we need all voting members to I think we typically have done it with officers. So officers stand by. So we reached out to some of the folks who worked on this, and Bob actually led the subcommittees that provided most of our impact, our reports on the impacts and what we provided for Frontier. And we all sort of worked and generated some ideas, some findings, some other elements as to the materials we submitted. But 4 people responded that they were interested in being voting APAC members. So tonight, Roger Bailey, Bill Jamaica, Melinda Peak, and George Steed. Melinda's on virtually with us tonight. First of all, thank you. And I hope I said thank you enough, and I probably didn't, but thank you. You know, this is not fun, right? When we, you know, but it's valuable for what we provide in terms of the community providing feedback to the process. And as long as we're neutral in our approach and being even-handed with applicants, developers, they seem to be willing to come and talk about it. We don't have to agree with them, but we want to find the best possible outcome for what's coming. A lot of things are zoned. They can just be approved the way they are, as long as they are compliant with elements of, you know, the county zoning ordinances and how they develop their projects. But our goal is obviously to find out what the impacts are. How can we, you know, mitigate the impacts that are negative to our community? And so you guys, that was a lot of work in a very short amount of time. So thank you again as we start this process of welcoming you in. So I'll make a motion that we vote to accept each and every one of these kind people as voting members of APAC.
I'll second that motion.
All right. So, and let me look at my list here, sorry. So I'll do a roll call of officers that are here tonight. So Tim, you sit next to me. We doing them individually or just all at once?
All at once.
All
All at once.
Yeah.
What say you, sir?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, Bob,
Absolutely. Yes.
Brooke.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I will make it a unanimous absolutely. It's just like the mob. You're not getting out. Sorry. But thank you again. I mean, we have more things coming up, so stand by. And the thing about voting members is that they work on a project. And once you do that, then you're eligible to vote. You can vote for new APAC officers, which is good because we need a lot of people to refresh this and keep this current. Sometimes we get tired. So, but I appreciate everything you did. And I hope the community acknowledges and recognizes the amount of work you put into it is very invaluable. So In addition, there were people in the community that were doing other activities as part of other organizations. And some of us were helping with them, but they were invaluable as well. So when communities participate, that's what we can do. And then, I think John might still be on, but George and John, they hear from you. That's the important part, right? In our planning commissioners. So thank you very much. So I don't know, do we get an opportunity for them to say anything? Like what a bunch of jerks are jumping in with, or? So no, if you have anything you want to throw in, that's fine, but thank you and welcome to being voting members.
I'd like to say something. It's been a real honor to have worked with each one of you. I know there are several others that haven't gotten back to you that may also at some stage become voting members as a result of their contributions. But to you here in the room and Melinda who is online, thank you. It's not always as exciting as Project Frontier. Sometimes we're just dealing with equally exciting things like the quick quack car wash.
Yes.
But but the community, that's just as important. And so
yes,
be expected to be called upon to do a lot of work in the future. Thank you.
Sorry, yeah. So, and then again, there were a dozen people that worked. And so we send that offer. Some of them might feel because they're working in other volunteer groups that there might be a conflict. They're welcome to continue working on projects. They just didn't want to be a voting member right now. And others have told me that they're willing to do it next year. They're just busy. So thank you again. And Melinda's is a member on her second shot at APAC because she also worked in Central El Dorado Hills. But she's in now. Thank you, Melinda. So I'm going to jump ahead in time here. So the other item we're going to talk about, we kind of hinted at it. It's Carson Creek R&D. We talked about it last month. It's labeled as Gateway El Dorado. And really all the project is right now is a parcel split. And we are on the screen, right? So we can sort of look.
But is it, John? Is it just that?
Well,
or is that just the first part of a phrase?
So there's a question.
As I read it, it's a parcel split in order to
yes.
For these certain uses.
So they're relying on the fact that they have existing zoning now, and this is consistent with what we talked about earlier, and the director's determination about R&D and the conflict with fulfillment. So it's a tentative parcel map to define 4 existing parcels that are 64 acres into 14. They call them R&D parcels. They are R&D right now, but they want to split them up into smaller parcels to be used for industrial wholesale distribution buildings. 2 open space lots, it's a drainage parcel, and those range from, all the different parcels range from like 3/4 of an acre to 13 acres in size. There's the APN numbers on this. They have the side of the road wrong in their application. It's the west side of Latrobe Road. It's essentially the Tractor Supply building that's brand new. It's on the north side of that. And previously, the Tractor Supply was going to be a mixed-use element of, what was it? Carson Creek Village.
Yeah.
Thank you. Specific, well, not the, So, and they proposed some high-density housing there. And I talked to a couple people at the chamber, and they said that they were having difficulty finding some buyers or some interested parties to develop that. So they had presented that in 2020. They did a pre-application for that housing sort of development and never got past that. So they're saying that they want to divide these parcels, split them up based off the existing R&D zoning. So there was a TAC meeting on May 15th. We got our notice late. We did supply a letter, and Bob worked on that. I was driving to Arizona, which is horrible, by the way, and driving back. But I was going to have everything from the letters. Very consistent with what we sent in for Project Frontier. The same concerns were there. Now, the thing is about this project, as Bob just described it, right now all it is a parcel split. And there's no project. There's nothing described. There's no buildings described. They did do a minor traffic impact analysis, very minor. So there's no project for us to review, but this is going forward that they're going to split these up. So then our question now is, with the determination from the planning department about the zoning ordinance for R&D, they submitted this before that determination was made, but they don't have a project. all they're doing is splitting the parcels, it'll be R&D, no project, I would think that it would have to be, it would be colored by the determination we just talked about. So moving forward, we'll just jump through real quick. And again, this is, in their application, they describe it as 840,000 to 1,100,000 square feet of buildings. But it could be 2 buildings, it could be 14 buildings, it could be 20 buildings on 14 parcels. So we don't know. This is a high level. This is a little closer. The project site is here, south of the freeway. It's south of Suncast Lane. Again, it's north of the Tractor Supply store that just opened. It's a little closer look at the map, and that's sort of the creek runs through it there. And it is across from Clubview, right? How's my memory working? So it's directly across from the main entrance at Blackstone. And as we look at what's in here, and this is how they're talking about dividing the parcels. What's interesting, and we'll get to it at the end, they had another application for another project that they withdrew right at the same time as this one went in. But so again, it's along Golden Foothill Parkway, and then south of Suncast, and it would be, parts of it would be right up against Latrobe, and there is a wetland that runs through it, the creek. This is the previous project they had talked about some high density, medium density, and then a small commercial usage, which is pink at the bottom, and then there's a pink element of it there at the top. So they described it as mixed use when they were talking about the residential development. And then they had left a lot of open space and drainage areas off to the west side of the project.
Can you go back?
That's the previous.
No, that's the previous. This over here is the new.
Yeah, on the right is the
On the
new.
right hand is the new. You'll notice that the Carson Creek, or Carson Crossing Drive, they call it now, is
A little different alignment.
it's terribly different. They also have 2 exits onto Latrobe, and they have that road leaping on through and connecting to what is Carson Crossing Road, that had really is really designated as basically technically a two-lane connector leaping through 2 residential communities. So the big issue to my mind is a number of those that they're going to ask in the questions actually, who's going to pay for this road? What kind of studies have been done in terms of the ingress and outgress, in terms of the 2 exits to Latrobe, the almost 4,000 additional trips that they're anticipating taking? How much impact will that have on the residential communities of Heritage and Blackstone as a result? It's really much more robust than simply a split. And even if you were to dismiss this thing totally and forget about the warehouse distribution aspect of it, and just looking at the transportation issue in and of itself, until we know who's going to pay for that road, because everything they're talking about is predicated on the completion of Carson Crossing Road through that, and the exits in and out of Latrobe, then this thing really has.
That was 3 years ago when we talked about the residential aspect of it. I know at the time they had talked about that they would build the extension of Carson Crossing.
Well, I know that, but again, if you look at the way it's looped.
There's probably a reimbursement agreement involved in there someplace. So, John, you got something.
An earlier version, when I was on staff, had a single access coming up to Latrobe at the curb, and we called it, the 2.5 access, entrance 2.5.
Okay.
And if you go out there, you see, part of that's paved, and you also see their con span they put in.
Right.
Because they're, just a little historical perspective, because their wetland permit was expiring. So they wanted to get that facility in. So there's, as you go out there and see, some work has been done already.
Yeah.
But that's what happened, some years ago, the first iteration, so.
Yeah, and that was consistent with what they explained to us when we were virtual then. It was during the middle of the pandemic. And then they did sort of a community, didn't they do a community presentation about it as well?
Yeah.
And then I think they did their pre-app with the Board of Supervisors. They did the J6 presentation. I don't think they got anything specifically negative back from the board, but my last conversation was that they intended to proceed, but then obviously nothing has happened with this. So, and again, that's just sort of the road alignments that we've been describing. That's Carson Crossing would come closer to the creek on the west side, and then it pitches back in. It shows like a divided lane entrance on Latrobe, but until that road is designed, nobody knows. You know,
We also see it connected going directly on up, so there'd be a second
yeah.
outlet to it.
And that showed as a bike lane, I think, when you
Yeah.
zoom in really close on it, it's pedestrian and other
But
elements.
then it gets to the point of how do these various parcels then connect? They're being divided.
Yeah.
You know, what is the mechanism for people to get in and out of these things? There's just a lot of unresolved
Yeah.
questions here.
So right now, they could be granted a parcel split. There's nothing that says that they can't have it. It's R&D. They're presenting their project, and that's the Carson Crossing, how it's been sort of realigned. It's a dead end right now. You can get into the Tractor Supply, but then you really don't go anyplace else. Right?
Except, John, if you again assume that all this is a parcel split.
Yes.
When you have a parcel split that is based upon a use.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have the full sentence.
Which is why we submitted the letter, because
I know.
we don't know what we don't know, but we also know what we don't know. What? Right. So there's a lot of
Exactly
questions.
right.
So, but then the other question, the other element of this too is like, well, now you have 14 parcels split if it's granted. So are we taking this a piecemeal approach to development, and over many years, you don't get a cumulative impact analysis when their intent is probably the full development, right? You know, they want to develop it. So.
Well, they're calling out 880,000 to 1.1 million.
Yeah.
Square feet.
And then I think the traffic was, I think, I was glad to see, but I was glad to see. You know, when we looked at Frontier, we identified I can't remember the organization, traffic engineers.
Yeah.
The Institute of Traffic Engineers, ITE, sorry. So we looked at what they said traffic generation should be based off of square footage for that fulfillment center. They're using the same guidelines in terms of the ITE standard. So we're at least happy to see that. So that informs a little bit. So what were we saying, like 3 to maybe 4,000? Was that?
Well, they're saying that 3,707 additional vehicles.
Yeah. So, which is, yeah, so.
But we don't know if those vehicles are passenger cars or semi-trucks.
Or parcel vans or
Right,
so.
right.
Until there's a project, we don't get those details, but that is why we submitted the letter. So hopefully they'll answer something. We've been getting answers on what we've submitted for TAC meetings. Even though we were late, I'm hoping that maybe the applicant will, I've not gotten a phone call back, so. So that's what we're looking at. And then to add on to this, I noticed the same, land, the Tractor Supply here in this map up here is gray at the top. They had submitted a project called Gateway El Dorado on March 28th. 3 commercial retail buildings, 2 drive-throughs. One's identified as a coffee shop with 2 lanes. So you can probably guess who that is. And then 1 other retail shop in the middle. But then they withdrew the project on April 14th. So not even a month, it's a couple of weeks. I can come back, I imagine. So just thought I'd put that so everybody could see that was a project that was submitted as a pre-app and now it's not. So is there anything else we're going to go over on this? Because we did send the letter. We'll put it on the project page for this on the APAC website.
It's been out there for about 3 weeks, and I'm kind of amazed that there hadn't even been an acknowledgement. How do we reach out again? What's the protocol?
Well, if it gets to be an agendized item about the parcel split, we submit more comments. But we could also send in we'll look at, I'm trying to remember who the planner was. We can send a letter to the planner and see if we get any, and we'll CC the Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission, sorry.
The original letter was submitted to all those, so.
Yeah. So, but just so people know, that is still something that they talked about. It's still a project that's in there for the parcel split. There's no detail, but I guess, I'm sorry, new voting members, because what we'll be working on shortly, I imagine. So.
Actually, I'd like to actually kickstart again our subcommittee and actually take a look at this thing, if this thing is still active. We don't
Well-
want to be rushed like we were at Project Frontier again.
Really.
And, you know, we have, I think, a skeleton, a 8-page skeleton of questions. I think we need to start taking a look at as new members and really flesh out what are the real major issues that still need to be addressed.
You know, we start with the letter, we don't get anything back. There's nothing that's been a follow-up on it. So we'll send another one to the planner and see if we get an answer, George.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed here is that the Department of Transportation did send a requirement for TIS and OSTR on this. But the only thing that's publicly available through eTrack or anywhere else are those trip generation excerpts.
Yeah.
There's no other detail there yet to be
That gets
working
turned in
from.
with the pre-application. So, and, well, we have an expert here. Sorry, John. And you're working tonight. You're leaving. Sorry. So that is typical, though, that they will ask if it meets a metric for requiring that. They ask for it. And that modicum of information we saw in that, and what was included in the pre-app, that meets the standard for what they have to supply it for now.
For some reason, my attention's a little divided these days.
What?
I haven't spent a whole lot of time looking at that, so I'm guilty.
Okay.
But
That-
yeah, I mean, one thing I've known of the team at DOT is they're responsive.
Yeah.
Talk to Adam Bain or Zach.
Zach, yeah.
They're very responsive and they'll be very patient with you and explain to you the process and hear your concerns or complaints. And if they're not, let me know.
Okay.
Like it matters.
You can write in on that big Texas horse and,
Oh, I complimented Raphael at a meeting with him. They're doing a bang up job as of late.
yeah, both Adam and Zach have been very responsive. So we'll probably, maybe that's our avenue there.
Okay,
So,
good idea.
good. Thank you, John. So did you have anything on this? You had enough of this?
No.
Okay. So,
Already handled.
so this a conditional use permit is our next agenda item for Latrobe Road self-storage. Again, it's self-storage. It's 700 units on a 12-acre plot of land right up against Latrobe Road again. They're talking about having a main entrance and exit for vehicles off of Suncast Lane, which is north of the project we just talked about, and a pedestrian entrance. The parking will be up front, and then every storage unit you can drive up to. Typical storage, everything. And this is a permitted use. They're having additional use permit, but it's permitted use with the R&D zoning.
With R&Z zoning, yeah.
Yeah.
I got a question on that because storage self is a defined use code in and of itself, separate from storage yard.
Yes.
And a self-service or a storage self is only identified as a permitted use in a commercial zone. It's not identified in the R&D zone, only the storage yard.
I'm trying to go backwards and think. I thought it was not a permitted use, but I think it's permitted with additional use permit. Because they're, what was it? I know what you're talking, yeah, I went through it too, but I'm drawing a blank. right now.
I'm curious
So-
about it, so.
So
as
as
a, you know,
we
as a
look at this
novice.
project, that's one thing we have to keep in mind. Is that the thing about the business park with that R&D zoning is that they've allowed schools, daycares, delis, everything under the sun to fill that place up. And they do provide some valuable things for our community in terms of services and business. But yeah, this one, additional use permit is what they're asking for. So apparently somebody pointed out to them that they needed it. I don't know, the Superior Self-Storage converted part of the Town Center West building. I can't remember the name of that company that used to be there. They made the CD jewel cases 100 years ago. But the Superior Self-Storage went in and converted that building, and they have plans to add on to the building, I think, add a new building as well. A lot of that's interior storage and not like a storage outdoor. So, and I think that they had the same thing, that a conditional use permit, but it was zoned for business, or industrial, I can't remember what Town Center West was for that parcel. But it was a similar thing, and they talked about it for several months before they got to and it was approved, so.
Well, I have just a couple of comments, additional comments. First of all, on the environmental impact, these are storage units. This thing buttress right against and along Carson Creek. And how they're going to be able to regulate what may or may not be stored in terms of toxic materials or anything else in those individual units, since it's right next to and aligned to the creek itself, is obviously something that that needs to be explored, certainly. The other thing is they threw in something called a incubator, a 60,000 square foot incubator in their plan that would service between 50 and 60 businesses.
Yeah.
What in the heck are they talking about in terms of an incubator associated with a storage? I don't see it mapped out any place.
Yeah.
They only are allowing 3 parking spots, places in the entire organization, entire area. So are they trying to somehow suggest that this is mixed use R&D utilization for this thing? Again, if they're going to approach this saying they want to have 724 exact units and then 60,000 square feet of incubator, what does that mean? That's, obviously a question that we need to ask them.
So, and it's important that you mention that because I believe, oops, I went too far. When is the TAC meeting on this? I've already forgot.
It already happened, I believe.
Did it?
I think.
Maybe I was thinking of something else.
I think it happened last week, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's one in July coming up and I can't remember. So, well, then we'll submit another letter. Boy, we're doing a lot of letter writing. But the questions we'd like to know the answers to. And Tim, I think your point too is when we talk about self-storage is that the traffic impacts are typically pretty minimal. The fact that they have 3 parking spaces, people go there during the day when they're open, they leave, they don't go back. So,
most of them, they go once, they load their stuff in there, and then they go back once a year or seasonally to get something out, and then they go make the payments and it's sold off on one of those TV shows.
so yes.
Do they own the land?
You know what? I'm trying to remember if they're selling it to the operator or if they've already bought it. I didn't see it in the.
Also, isn't there a self-storage across the street?
Yes.
On the west side near the reclamation
Yeah.
center already?
Mhm.
Yeah.
East side, yeah.
They get zones there and different zone on
Yep,
the
it
side of
is.
the street.
There are already 2 on that side of the road.
Yeah.
So the U-Haul place,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. This new one is is zoned R&D.
Yeah, it's inside the business.
The other ones across the street are industrial, light industrial. So,
Oh, and that'll be consistent when they make their application. They come and talk about it. It's like, well, we already have those uses. We heard that for the EDH Folsom Lake storage on Shadowfax in Green Valley, and like Sophia Parkway. And they said, well, there's already a open air storage yard on the other side of Sophia Parkway past the AMPM. Just another, so, we worked with them. They were actually pretty engaged with us. So that was nice that they came and talked to us quite a bit. I think like 4 meetings at least that we had them. Yeah, and so we had, again, there's a lot of residential that was right behind it, some up the hill towards Folsom Lake, but they talked about, we asked for better screening from landscaping, and the one thing I think they didn't budge on that initially they wanted to have an open yard for boats and RV until they got going, and then they would stop doing that. So.
That's the one off of Green Valley next to the.
No, it's Shadowfax, which is the county line, in front of the Mormon Island Cemetery. I want to say across from the Purple Place, but yeah, they're working right now. They're grading and yeah. And there's another project that's going in there that we've talked about that we'll have to keep talking about, a retail center. So, we'll have to submit questions to this and just see if we can get some answers. And so that's that. So we already talked about, did we talk? No, we didn't. Kind of don't want to talk. We mentioned last month, they had, in May, they got to the planning commission. This is Eastwood Village, which is part of the Valley View Specific Plan, which is essentially Blackstone and also, what is it called? West White Rock, or no, it's White Rock Village. So the multifamily is across from Target along Valley View Parkway. So they had been to the planning commission on May 11th. And so this was approved in 1998. They had a development agreement. It's like 700 lots. This is on a hillside with a ridge. They're going to be high-end homes. They're not going to be, I imagine there'll be some production homes. There'll probably be a lot of custom homes involved. But their project, I think we talked to them, we were at Bridlewood Canyon when they came and talked to us 6 years ago. Basically, it's their development agreement has expired in 2018, I believe. I remember 2018, 2019, 20 years, 98, 2018. But they did get a time extension on the subdivision maps for East Ridge Village, which is, the other part of the Valley View Specific Plan. But that's expiring next year. So technically, I believe the conversation, and I listened to it again, the Planning Commission meeting today. That'll distract you from work, by the way. But essentially, what they've proposed is that they want to come in and do a new development agreement, which will extend their project, the tentative maps, the 10 years. And they're willing to do, but in doing so, they want to get rid of the Melrose, the CFD that they established from 98 forward for this project and do a new one that would go another, I think till 36. I can't remember the year. Sorry, guys. The new development agreement, as part of that new development agreement, there'll be a $500 per lot community benefit fee. So it's White Rock Village. That multifamily projects over there, the apartments, the townhomes, that exceeded the requirements that they wanted to do for their old development agreement for affordable housing. So they don't have that affordable housing element in this project of the East Ridge Village. So they met the requirements there. Blackstone's essentially built out. They've met and all the conditional use requirements and all the infrastructure for Blackstone. So this project, they want to do a new development agreement. But the unique part of this development agreement, in addition to the $500 per lot community benefit fee, is that there's an element of the CFD, the Melrose, where instead of the excess money collected for the Melrose for funding infrastructure for this, they've identified that it would go to the county. The excess money would go to the county instead of going back to the developer to cover their costs for infrastructure. I can't get my head around it. I'm sorry, planning commissioners, I think they struggle a little bit with it too. And the applicant said at the planning commission meeting, it's like, why are you asking me so many questions? This is a benefit for the county. It's like, well, I couldn't understand what the reasoning was, why he wanted to do it anyways, other than the fact that he wants to extend. And they don't have a development agreement anymore. So the planning commission approved it with some requests. And this is a map of this area. It's basically the ridge below Marble Valley and to the east of Blackstone. And gorgeous land. So, but here we go. So 700 units, and that's sort of the tentative map we're talking about with Blackstone to the west. So one-time $500 per dwelling unit fee. It's indexed to CPI, so that as the inflation comes into play, that $500 will be more each time that the index gets applied every year. So it can be $512 the next year, 15, the steps, so it'll keep going up, which is a good thing to have in place. And to be utilized for any purpose benefiting the community is defined as determined by the sole direction of the Board of Supervisors. So it's essentially a general fund money. So when we talk about that $500, 700 lots, $350,000. So, but if it's over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, those dollars, $350,000 today won't pay for anything in 5, 20, 15 years, but it's there.
Also, the problem with it, and we've seen this in other developments, including potentially Central, is the community benefit fee goes to the general fund. It doesn't stay in the community. Now, they're defining the community as all of El Dorado County, and I understand that, but the building is in El Dorado Hills. It's going to affect the parks. It's going to El Dorado Hills. It's going to affect us locally. Some parts of those community benefit fees should actually be designated to go to the community that's going to be affected. You know, this traffic and everything else is not going to affect people up in South Lake Tahoe or in Cool or in Grizzly Flats. It's going to affect the people in El Dorado Hills. And the board, I think the Board of Supervisors says, okay, well, this is money coming to the general fund. We can decide how we're going to use it. They lose sight of the fact that it's us, the residents in the community, El Dorado Hills, that should be getting the benefit of those monies.
So, and since it goes to general fund, future boards can decide future things. If it's not bound to some conditional, so, and again, the other item too here is the county shall be entitled to receive the PAYGO 2023 CFD special tax revenues beginning the first year that the tax is levied. So I know the auditor and our former CAO, who's retired, they brought this forward. They talked about it at the board in February and directed them to take it to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission heard about it. But that PAYGO that I struggle still, and I listened to that meeting twice, the CFD money to Mello-Roos. You know, Mello-Roos are pretty specific in terms when you apply it and you establish that Mello-Roos, the money is supposed to go for things specific to that CFD. So they're saying that the excess money, the PAYGO in that first year, would go to the county. And I know the auditor described it as potentially tens of millions of dollars, but then they couldn't describe actually what it is because until you're going to build improvements, you don't know what your costs are and you don't know. So, and the way they describe it is that when you do a CFD, a Mello-Roos, you always have to overtax because you can't go back and you got to make sure you cover your costs. So I don't know, with Prop 218, it's very specific, I know, for assessments that they get applied to exactly what it says it's going to be applied to, and you don't move that money to something else. So I still don't understand how that worked. I think the Planning Commissioners asked a lot of the same questions. So they did approve it, and there's the county will be entitled to receive the 2003 CFD special tax revenues in excess of debt service on the bonds. So I don't know how that works. And so the Planning Commission went ahead and approved it after some rigorous debate. I think I'm being generous with say rigorous. But they also asked these three additional items that staff should meet with the El Dorado Hills Fire Department and the CSD because they submitted public comments. The fire department is talking, I don't want to point at a fire board member right now, but the fire department is concerned about access. You know, this is ridges and the southern end of this is Ryan Ranch Road, which is, you know, a road in name. It's not, you know, the equipment that we use for our firefighters, the access in and out, you know, they want to avoid the EVA roads because, you know, they're also thinking of getting people out, not just the fire apparatus in. So they had some concerns about that. And I know Chief Fields provided some public comment about that. And so I think the commissioners decided, yeah, you know, maybe let's talk about this and make sure that we're clear on what we're doing. So the El Dorado Hills CSD, they have a district-wide Mello-Roos essentially, and any new project is coming in has to be in it. That's how they're going to build parks, going to do CFD, and all those monies get applied to the district. So it's so they had some questions about their CFD, and I know the fire department's talking about it too. So I know that they had a conversation. I don't know that it went well, but they were directed to have that conversation with those agencies specifically and any other interested agencies prior to the board's consideration. They need to provide an update. So that's the July hearing, sorry. The board should consider the PAYGO funds, the excess funds, under the development agreement, be prioritized to mitigate local road impacts. So El Dorado Hills, like Tim was saying, impacts are here. You're generating that community benefit fund. What community are we talking about? So that was another recommendation from the Planning Commission. And they also recommended the board they should consider an additional term that's consistent with what was done for Carson Creek, the development agreement for the Heritage 2. I always forget the name of that. Specifically about a regional connector road. The applicant I know does not want to build a road. They don't want to build another road for that accessibility the fire department's talking about. They say, hey, we have an approved project, we'll just build it. well, they're asking for something specific here. So if you're asking, I think that opens it up to everybody, but maybe that's not the interpretation from our county council and our planning department. But so it was on the Board of Supervisors agenda on June 6th in terms of a consent item. So they're going to be coming back for a public hearing on July 18th to talk about it some more. So it's just so that here in the community, we really didn't supply any information on it because one, I don't think we understood it. And I had talked to the auditor a little bit about it, not much. Apparently it's a great thing. But I don't understand the reason. So the applicant's very consistent. Well, why am I doing this if you're going to quibble over this? We have the right to go ahead and do this right now. If they file a tentative map, they get extended 10 years automatically by virtue of the old development agreement, which is expired. Yeah. So it's a lot of thumb twiddling and arm twisting. Can you opine upon this now that it's been passed through commission?
Yep.
Oh.
A little clarity on item 3, because I brought that issue up.
Yes.
Is that, and no, we were not asking the developer to build the road. This was if Marble Valley comes in with a connection, which has been discussed. I know Supervisor Heidel has had discussions with Parker Development, who owns Marble Valley, that we had language in the Carson Creek, like for the road to the west, which many of us know, that because I'd raised that issue for the Carson Creek project. That if Marble Valley ends up building a road, they would simply need to connect to that road. That was the thrust of the discussion. And so I won't get into some of the characterizations about the prospects of that by the applicant, but so it's if something built, because there's only one permanent roadway access in and out of there.
Yeah.
And it's a brand new world with fire protection and stuff for the applicant when it comes to this, and the fire department obviously as well, because you have one access, which is Valley View, and you have a bunch of EVAs. That's it. And so that was my concern as well. And so I know the fire department's trying to work through some of those issues and see how this develops.
Yeah, and I had emailed Chief Johnson to see if I kind of remembered that they're deciding the fate of a fire station in Cameron Park tonight. I knew that fire staff would be over there as part of that conversation because they've been very good and very consistent about letting them know what the impact's going to be on aligned agencies for firefighting. So they're there tonight. I was just wondering if Chief had an opportunity maybe to supply something, but I know those discussions are ongoing. I think the important thing is that when it's back on July 8th, we should have a subcommittee look at this and discuss providing a letter to support what the fire department is talking about in terms of that access and not just the EVAs, because the standards have changed since this was approved in 1998. They're asking for a new development agreement. I think it's fair to consider what the modern world is now and just not say, hey, but we had this back then, we don't want to do. And it's their right. They say that there's a path for them to go forward and get this extended by 10 years without doing anything else, just by filing the tentative map. So they're final, that is. So we shall see. So if anybody works on a subcommittee on this, let me know. We can talk after the meeting or email. So that meeting at the board is July 18th. So we have time to at least go through it. So we did talk about the director's determination already. So we'll skip through all these. And so just some area project updates. There is a Verizon wireless communication facility proposed on Hillsdale Circle. Essentially, it's kind of east of Heritage, but it is still in the business park, sort of along Carson Crossing. It's just south of.
It's exactly 6 feet away from Carson Crossing, but
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So you can see on the map there, it's the red dot towards the bottom. And as we look at this, a conditional use permit, the thing about most of the cell towers is that the FCC regulates how telecom companies place these things. There's not a lot that the county has in terms of input. I know we had a big discussion a year ago about the improved telecom facilities for at Oak Ridge High School. The applicant did not seem to have their stuff together that day, and that was a long meeting. Thank you, Commissioner. That lasted all day, waiting for hey, should we get the lawyer on the phone and they can clarify this? And I don't think they ever did. Planning Commission denied it, which they could do, but it's a recommendation to deny. The Board of Supervisors, I guess, they were satisfied with the answers that they developed afterwards. And I know a lot of people are concerned about the impacts from 5G, but the federal government says that height, and anything you and I say here locally to the state, it doesn't matter. The federal government says it's safe at those heights. So we're sitting below one right now. The fire station 3 years ago. There's a new telecom facility in the tower back here, but it also augments some of the fire services communications devices. And the thing with the school district, the thing here is that there's a bit of revenue attached to that too. So there is some community benefit. So this one, we can look and see, they are ugly things. There's a technical advisory meeting on July 24th. If we can get a group of questions or concerns, we can provide that and just see what sort of answers we get. Again, this is a map of where they're saying it's going to be. Which is it? Marble Valley Academy's right across from it. Yeah. So there is a school like across the property line. It's close. And then they have some representative drawings. They use a drone to fly up. They have a circle there with the white box with the text. That's where the drone is. And then they've superimposed the monopine looking sort of tower that you see in a lot of places.
Your backyard, Leanne. In mine.
Did they take it from your backyard? So this is the look here. That's at Palmdale and Carson Crossing, with how it would look from that site. This is, I believe, from
Carson Crossing still.
Yeah, looking from Golden Foothill Parkway.
Right.
So at the intersection, and again, there's that monopine in the middle of the picture on the bottom, and this is from the other side of the property where they're across from an existing facility. Where they're showing where it shows up behind the building there. So, and again, this is from Latrobe. So from Latrobe, it's not so bad, but for residents that are over there, and again, what they do is, with the federal government, they go through and the federal government's identified that there's a need for in terms of public safety, for these facilities to be available. So we'll make some comments, I'm sure, if there's some group. I would say people in Heritage, people in Blackstone, I want to contribute. George, you know something?
No, just one quick question there, and I don't know whether it's come up on other things, but looking at the noise ordinance requires an additional, what's the right term? To take ambient noise into account in the noise analysis. And the noise analysis submitted with this one specifically states that no ambient noise considerations were made.
Oh, it said it wasn't me. I thought it said that they determined there wasn't. I've been reading too many of these. So the same thing for that quick quack on Santa Ridge. We had concerns because it's like 120 feet, 170 feet from houses in Serrano J6. And their noise analysis said it's not even 1 decibel louder than what's already there. In terms of the safe way with the compressors and the air conditioning and the other retail sort of things, they said it's not even 1 full decibel. And they've mitigated with some baffles on the air dryers. It's their big solution. So that is a question. So we'll ask about the sound.
Is it because it's encouraged by the federal government for better communications, safety reasons, all sorts of stuff? Is there an issue with the height? Because obviously 98 feet is above 50-foot limit that we have in the business park now, countywide now.
Countywide, yeah.
But I know that, and maybe Commissioner McDaniel could comment. Sorry, John. But on all the hearings that you have, and I know this is always a controversial, and usually they are in more remote areas to fill the gap. People are concerned about, they're losing their view or their whatever. For whatever reason, people object to it. Is there a height limit concern with the
No, I don't know how that would apply. That'd be a good question for planning when it comes to that. It could. Haven't given that much thought, and I'm not going to, no offense. But I know it's still an issue. I got a call for cell service. I got a call, and Cindy, you know who I'm talking about, because I referred him to Cindy, and Cindy had talked to him before, over in Springfield Ranch.
Yeah.
There's a community of folks that don't have, and they can't get cell service. No one will provide it for them. What's that? Is it Stonebridge? Well, it used to be called Springfield Ranch, and they changed it to Stonebriar.
Stonebriar, yeah.
Yeah, it used to be called Springfield Ranch, but that's showing my age, so. But,
Well, and to be fair, when John calls my cell phone, I go, hold on, I gotta call you from a landline at my house in Bass Lake because half the time it doesn't work. All right.
And so there's still a need, but I haven't given that much thought on the height, but yeah, it could apply, 50-foot height, that's true, so.
So we,
I just don't have the answer.
But you look at
oh, cool.
particularly with cellular, the radiation patterns there are specifically addressed by the height of that
Yeah.
antenna or Stonebriar and that area. So clearly that's what they're targeting.
Well, we have another one that's coming, that's towards the end of this discussion, so let's see if we can just make some informed questions, get some answers, we'll ask those and submit that letter in time.
George, you're elected to construct those questions.
See what happens when you get voted in. So, and again, this is another look, and this is from Carson Crossing, right, across the road, so, same thing. So here we go, Central Elder Hills. And I know it, where's my list of people who are, I'm never gonna find it here, sorry guys, I just gotta see who's still in the room. Okay, so I don't think John's on anymore. Supervisor Heidel had mentioned at the community council, I was driving from Arizona, so you guys could probably fill me in better. I listened to the recording that it's been suggested that that Central might be coming back to the Board of Supervisors in August.
Correct.
And I'm hearing that maybe it is later. I think Commissioner Payne had said something that would probably be later than August, is what he had been with his ear to the railroad tracks. That's what he had heard. But we have no idea of what's been proposed as a change in this project. We have not heard from the applicant since, I think, August or September of more than a year ago. And so, we made our findings, I think our recommendations and our findings were consistent with the findings of the Planning Commission, voted 5-0. That there's problems with DIR, it wasn't consistent with the general plan. And so I think that they're talking about maybe some development agreement changes, which really don't address any of the things that we were concerned about. I mean, we're concerned about elements of the development agreement, but until there's something that's in the public for us to know about and talk, I suspect we'll be taking our 72 pages and resubmitting it for the Board of Supervisors to consider, unless there's something different. If there's something different, we would welcome the opportunity to look at it and provide some thought to it. We live here like everybody else. We have some concerns. So, but there's nothing that's put out in front of us that we can intelligently speak about right now. It's still the same project until it isn't. And so if it's coming up in August, that gives us a very narrow window, if there's changes, to look at it and not just, shake our fist and grab a pitchfork, torches, we're not about that. We're about saying, hey, these are the impacts we see and can we make this better? Right now we couldn't find a way to support the project because of the negative impacts of it. So I don't know if there's anything that you want to.
I think it's unclear when at community council meeting, when we asked Supervisor Heidel whether or not this would be going back to the Planning Commission. You would think that it would, but that will be determined. The development agreement apparently is being negotiated by the people who negotiate that. It's not the supervisors, but it's representatives from planning and DOT, the CAO's office, and it could come back to the Board of Supervisors with 2 weeks notice, and you might get the development agreement 1 or 2 weeks before it's actually be discussed and voted on. And these agreements, they can be lengthy, 20 to 50 or 70 pages, depending on what's in there. And it's all legal language, and it takes time to read and review.
Yeah.
So we may not have a lot of time. We may have to react very, very quickly. We've asked in the past on some of these to get an additional 2 weeks, but that's solely at the discretion of the Board of Supervisors, whether they want to grant us additional time to look at.
It was my impression also that it would not be going back to the planning commission at this stage. No?
So,
They have the right to send it back if they feel nothing, if they feel there's additional questions or it would warrant going back to the planning commission to make a revised recommendation.
Correct.
oh, and again, if there's nothing that's really substantially changed other than the development agreement, I suspect that our feedback will be, here's our analysis from 2 years ago. It's consistent with what your planning commissioners suggested in their advisory role as well. So, but I'm sure, if people hear about it, people will be engaged and they'll be submitting comments. So you won't be getting them anymore. So where would we be able, where would we be able to have it? Our district? Okay. ISD gym is probably not neutral ground, so I don't know. There's some restrictions about how you use the floor there too. So in terms of the basketball and the volleyball surfaces. So, well, I would welcome that discussion to be had here in the community because I think it's important. It's a transformative project. And when the planning commission was able to have that meeting at District Church, 500 people showed up. A good planning commission meeting is a dozen people, 2 dozen, or something volatile. So 500, I think that makes a statement that people are interested in their concerns. So, but we put this on the agenda tonight just because Supervisor Heidel mentioned it at the community council meeting earlier this month. And we're just saying, hey, it's still the same project to us. And if there's something different, we'll look at it. You have a thing in front of you with a green light? Does that one work?
Can't get a developer to come along and talk to us here. When was the last time that Parker, or should we even settle for Bone, to come and talk to us about these things? I mean, it would really help them and help us significantly. I mean, is it not worth it trying again instead of waiting for it to get to the planning commission or something like that?
That's fair. We had them, they did not come in the first almost 10 years of the project, the APAC. They did agree to come and we sat down with them. We went to their offices and they explained, here's what we're doing, here's where we're at. And we said, can you please come? And they agreed to come. And we had them, we were at the CSD building, I want to say it's 2019, like right before Christmas, when we expected it to be going for four hearings at the planning commission. And then, we did the one at the district church, but they came back later after COVID hit and there were some changes to, we talked about one more alternate use with zoning consistent where they were talking about like a Top Golf sort of facility and just changing, they just put it in, said, this is still our project, but we have somebody who's interested in doing like a Top Golf facility. We have somebody who's interested in doing a massive senior housing community. It was sort of a senior care facility, not like a age restricted, but they said, but those are other considerations of, that are part of our analysis, but we want to do this project. We're not doing those alternate. So that's the last time that they came and talked to us in person.
Yes, I'm sure of that, but, there's been an awful lot of work on integration. You just said that you don't even know what the number is. this, but I think it's also incumbent on people listed R&D talk or whether it's going to get.
Excuse me, does he have a mic?
Yeah, it's green. As long as it's green, just hold it close to you.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm sorry.
There you go, Joel. Is this better?
Anyway, my point is that I
Thank you.
think developers should and can and be more open. And if they're invited to do so, well, I don't know, but that's one thing. The other thing that really upsets me quite a bit is that when I see large projects like this, and we talk about a lot of projects coming in the pipeline, when analyzing this particular project a year ago, I dove into the water supply. And I came up with a deficit for the water deficit if there was no improvements made that they said they would make in order to get more water. And I know this is a tickly subject, but 20 years ago when I was working over here on entitlements, water was a real issue. And so when I do an analysis on this and I find there's a deficit, what's going on? Has someone looked at all these things? Is it incumbent on us and APAC to raise a question? I know there's a hardworking member of the Planning Commission here, but it's just these things that go against my grain, and let's invite people and talk. Maybe I'm idealistic. Thank you for your time.
No, and for us, I know developers are reluctant, right, to come and to get the arrows, to take them. And there were a lot of arrows at the first meeting we had with them. And to their credit, they stayed for the whole meeting and they answered, as best as they could or how they wanted to, which is fair. That's all we can ask. But we do want to remain engaged, right? So we want to have those conversations because, as you've described it, it's better to be having the discussions before it gets to somebody making the decision. And we can provide some input. The water one is always weird for me because we asked a question too about like the high school district. We had them, the superintendent come and say, you guys never have a problem with any development project. And they say, oh, our enrollment's declining and they have reasons for, but I've talked to the principal at Oak Ridge and he says, my enrollment's not declining. Even though the district, their forecast says it will. The other schools are, but EID is always a solid yes on the water exists. Based on, what and I remember before we built here that there was a building moratorium. No water, couldn't build here. And we got water now, so. But EID is the authority, right? When they submit their paper and they say, yes, this project, we've analyzed it. We have the water rights that would satisfy it. But if they all build at once, do we really have sufficient? Until we hit that roadblock, we don't know. So, but we asked the question, and I think that we included that when in your analysis, we included that in our paperwork that we submit, or in our findings and our recommendations when we did it. So Alistair's very detailed on, and he has a lot of experience with this. So, thank you. So Central, if something comes up, we'll supply it. We'll have some sort of response. We just don't know when it's going to happen and what it's going to look like. So, a lot of work went into that, a lot of review. So, moving ahead, this is one I found today. The application was put in on June 1st in Trackit. So Montana de El Dorado, a couple years ago, they were doing a phase 2 where they're going to massively expand the commercial center there. They'll have a little bit of office. They had I think a grocer was approved in there. Had a hotel that they were talking about. So it's a big thing. And to the applicant's credit, we talked to them a lot. He was at our meetings. We had special meetings with just him and the community adjacent behind to the east of the project. Yeah, the Vinyl Perkins. So I found this in Trackit today because I want to make sure we weren't missing anything on our updates. It was approved in 2021, did a full EIR, had some conditions of approval that we had suggested should be included, and he said, yeah, let's do it. So we really had a good dialogue with him as an applicant, and he got his project approved. The marketplace has changed. There aren't a lot of stores, there aren't a lot of office buildings. So what they're proposing is modifying, the master plan was approved after the project. So that was a trailer bill essentially, like we do with the state. But master plan to incorporate mixed use, and they're talking about, I thought it was part of it, it's actually the full 14 acres of phase 2. So they're talking 14 acres, 330 dwelling units, it would be townhomes, apartments, 23 dwelling units per acre, which is right up against the county, is 24 dwelling units per acre. So he's within the standard. He would have 4-story multiplexes between 42 and 72 units per building, because the topography there is on slopes and grades. So that's a parcel map, and we're talking about Montana de El Dorado is where like Relichburger is, the waterfalls along White Rock and Latrobe. So it's south of the existing project, and it's a unique shape project, so we'll get into it here. So from their application, the letter that they included was they believe it's a prime mixed-use project for the new trend and the future of El Dorado Hills living. It's a key area where town center and Montana meet, and town center is just to the north across the street. Lend itself to the encouragement of walkable paths to goods and services directly from residential front door to a horizontal mixed-use environment, meaning the up and downstairs. Talk about the current elements that are in Montana: restaurants, spas, boutiques, morning coffee, all that stuff. So, and then a walkable path exists to getting to the movies and other elements in town center east. So this is sort of the view of what they're proposing. So the existing Montana de El Dorado buildings are sort of along the, this map is turned, so it's along the northern edge and along right where the waterfall is in front by Relichburger. But the rest of it is parking garages and buildings. And they describe here, and these, they're all, the back of the buildings are on hillsides, so there's 3 floors. The front of the building is 3 floors plus a garage underneath on most of them. And this is a pre-app, so they'll go and talk to the Board of Supervisors. The board will give their feedback. But essentially saying that, they had a hotel use lined up. That hotel use does not exist anymore. The office buildings that they were talking about, there's not a demand for office buildings. And the county has been pretty explicit about developing additional housing of different housing types, not just single family homes, 3,000, 4,000 square foot, 2,000 square foot. He's talking about the multifamily, and that the mixed use would be a convenience for this sort of housing use. So then the question is, well, now do we have to look at the traffic analysis again? Do we have to talk about the noise, the air, all those things we did in EIRs? It's just they're adding this mixed use to it. We don't know until they get to for the Board of Supervisors. Oops, I went too far. So I literally just found that today. I just wanted to include it so that we know that we're going to be talking about this eventually. So, and since it's brand new, do you have any questions about it? I have no answers. So, but it's just unfortunate. He worked 9 years to get that project approved for phase 2. It took a long time to get phase 1 approved, and now those uses seemingly for the marketplace don't exist anymore. There's no opportunity for more office space, more, or another grocer, for more retail. We've been seeing that retail converting back and forth.
One of the key issues is going to be the right-in, right-out access.
It's still right, yeah.
Road, because I know they had talked at one point in time of putting in a signalized entrance where the market was going to be.
Yeah.
And having the ability to come out and turn left going down Latrobe. So that's probably an improvement. But we still have the right-in, right-out on White Rock, and that's very steep, as you know. It's 1 lane in each direction.
And it's curved.
And and if you have people living there, I know they talk about walkability and all that, but people are still going to get out and drive. I bet a lot of those people are not going to be walking to Target or Nugget to buy their food. They're going to get in their car, cross the street, and that's, I think, it's the concern that we had about that ingress and egress might be amplified by a change in use.
Yeah, and they're still showing a traffic signal there for the main entrance.
Yeah.
And so, and the other thing too is that they were talking about extending Post Street in the last project. Post Street would run through it as sort of an extension of Post Street from town center, but both streets would be private roads. They're not, county maintained roads. And right now I know, and I think they had an application for additional parking lot lighting for the existing facilities in Montana. And I think that the application was incomplete, so it didn't follow. And that was just a couple months ago. But, that road, that was always a concern with us. We talked about, well, if that road goes through, are people going to cut through there to get onto White Rock to go east? And, when we talk about traffic, a lot of times the traffic planners will say, well, drivers won't do that. It's like, traffic's like water. It just goes where it goes, right? So if somebody thinks, if it's not faster, if they think it's faster, they're still going to do it. So that parking lot right now is substandard. Let's just say that in terms of how you move around sight lines and parking spaces. So we'll see. I mean, if this comes forward, I will be looking at this again as another project.
John, I have one more project that is not on your agenda yet, if I could quickly mention it.
Go, please do it.
Okay, and that's an update to the Creekside Village
So are we,
proposal.
and that was a conversation with the homeowners there, but
Well, no, what occurred is George Steed and I, two representatives from Blackstone, met with Tom Wynn,
yes,
the owner of the property, Bree.
you should describe the property as essentially the Frontier property.
Yeah, it's the Frontier property. Previous to the Frontier, as you all might remember, that was to be I believe 700 or so.
709
Yeah, single home
residential
sites. Well, it's now back to something very similar to that that's being proposed. I don't believe that they've gone far enough in the development yet to want to come to speak to us. Both George and I made the point that they really need to get APAC involved in this process when that is appropriate. But nevertheless, as things evolve sometimes, you begin with a residential property, then you end up with for temporarily, a massive warehouse, and now another set of residential properties. Where that'll end up, maybe a whole farm of cell towers, who knows?
And to Wynn's credit, they were very engaged with us. That property was de-annexed out of the Business Park Association, 200 acres. And that was like one of the first things that we talked about when John was elected to the board of supervisors. That came up. Essentially, the business park wasn't building out. It's 40 years old. The projection was 40 to 60 more years before it actually absorbed all the property that could be used. And it was declining. So DST ended up owning that property. They de-annexed it, sold it to Wynn. The original conversation was that the business park needed more workforce housing because there's no place for their employees to live. So I think the first drawings we saw were apartment buildings, some townhomes, and some single-family homes. And they just said they have no market for townhomes, apartments, even though that seems to be the rage right now. So who knows what the project will come back as, but it did develop into Creekside Village. They had done a notice of preparation for an EIR. We had a public scoping meeting that was virtual, thanks to COVID. But they came to APAC, I think 3 times at least. And we had good discussions. They heard our feedback. But again, like 700 to 900 homes. So that's back in some fashion now, and we'll see how they're able to proceed with that. It could get scaled down, it could maybe get scaled up. We don't know.
So let's say 800 homes.
Okay.
Typically in a residential community, you're going to see 8 trips from those homes per day. Let's assume it's a couple with some kids. It's going to work, going doctor's appointments, school appointments, sports activities, going to the coffee shop.
APAC meetings.
APAC meetings, of course.
So I mean, that would be 6,400 daily trips. That's going to put a burden on Latrobe. It's going to affect the traffic, the people's residents on Blackstone and Heritage that are already there. And unless they plan on widening Latrobe Road such as Project Frontier. These they were gonna try to widen the road, and it was gonna be in the county,
In the CIP, yeah.
CIP plan. Now, it's out of the, widening that road is out of the CIP plan, because Project Frontier is gone. So, I mean,
Well,
if they
and
improve it, we have, that's just gonna be, you're gonna have more traffic there, a different type, but you're probably gonna have more trips per day than you would if Frontier gone in. I know Frontier would have diesels and all that.
well, we weren't clear on that, right? That was part of the problem. So if I use my crystal ball, when we talked to Wynn the first time, they said that that residential usage was like 50% or less than what it's already approved for R&D, which is the same conversation we had with Frontier. And we'll probably be the same conversation we'll have again with Wynn, is that it's less usage than what's already approved and what the general plan envisions. The devil's in the details. The math is the math. The other aspect of this is the vehicle miles traveled. It's a standard now, but we also still have level of service. So and when we sent our letter about Latrobe being widened, and maybe this is the wrong time to throw that for the CIP for that section, that was a consideration. It's like, well, if we're saying don't put it in CIP, are we shortchanging the community if this project doesn't happen by saying take it out? It's a 20-year document. But the transportation department said, yeah, we hear all these concerns. This is probably not the appropriate time to do it. It should come back with this project if it proceeds. So, and that's we hesitate to send that comment and saying, hey, don't add Better Road into our CIP. But the idea is the only way you get it is you collect those monies up front over too many years. So we hesitated a little bit. It's like at the end of the day, it's like, this seems like you're serving the Frontier project and not the community. So that's why we sent the letter.
Let's not forget that land is still, it's been de-annexed from the business part.
But it's still R&D.
It's still zone R&D, so it will require a zoning change to residential.
Yeah. So we shall see. So that was my surprise today, and then I had to come back and redo this. So, and the other, there's another Verizon communications tower. It's on Malcolm Dixon Road. They put an application on April 17th. They got an incomplete notice letter on April 19th. So that's consistent with what they presented to the Planning Commission when they did the Oak Ridge cell towers. They just didn't have their stuff together. But the project location is a little better look. It's right here in the middle, and I'm trying to remember the road name, but it's east of where the realigned Malcolm Dixon is, where the new alignment is for the vineyards. And it's on the south side of Malcolm Dixon. And again, they have some, they have some sets of, here's what it looks like now, here's what a monopine looks like. And the last set on the rooms, right, is from Green Valley Road, looking across.
You have a nice looking tree though.
You think so?
Yeah.
Christmas lights. But again, it's an incomplete application. I'm sure they'll come back and satisfy the requirements of what the planning department has asked them and proceed with it. I haven't heard, I don't know that anybody in Malcolm Dixon knows about this. I only know a couple people. They do? Send them our way. But I had not heard anything from anybody about this. And in fact, it took me a while to find this. Okay. But it is District 4, is it not? Okay. So yes. If they have concerns, we would love to hear them, and so they could help us promote that. But again, because of the way the FCC and the federal government regulates these facilities, how we respond and how much the county can touch it or condition it or mitigate, it's still unclear. So maybe we might want to ask the planning department to come in and talk about that. So here we go. How late is it? So again, if you have public comments you want to submit in advance, send them in by the Monday before our meeting by 5 o'clock. That way we get them here. We'll try to get them answered for you. You can email edhapac.comment@gmail.com, or you can send to our info account. Our next meeting is Tuesday, July 18th, because there's another use here in the building. So we're a week off and we're a day early. But 6:30, same thing. We'll do it virtually. And if there's no anything to go back to, a lot of stuff. Sorry, everyone. But thank you, new voting members. So with that, I guess we are adjourned. Okay, and so let me stop the recording. Isn't that great? Now we can talk freely.